Thank you all so much.
Here.
Councilmember Brown?
Here.
Councilmember Fahey?
Here.
Councilmember Dickinson?
Here.
Mayor Stolzman?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney? Councilmember Lay?
Here.
Thank you, everyone. Our first order of business is a proclamation observing Juneteenth Independence Day, June 19th, 1865, the day on which slavery finally came to an end in the United States. We're celebrating June 19th, 2021. And I'll start, there's no staff presentation on this evening, so we'll start with any members of the public that would care to comment on this agenda item. Seeing none, that takes us back over for the proclamation. I just want to thank Liz and the Boulder County NAACP for bringing forward the idea to have all of the communities in Boulder County celebrate Juneteenth Independence Day. And they did a great job up in Longmont. It was really Longmont and spearheading the whole thing. And it was a beautiful celebration on Monday, raising the flag, singing, learning about the meaning of the flag. And so you'll see in our proclamation, we encourage all residents of the community to learn more about this event. And the most exciting news happened this week is that it will now be a federally recognized national holiday. And so it's fantastic, wonderful, joyful news that that's going to happen and that there was unanimous consent of the U.S. Senate in making that happen. That's a very remarkable accomplishment, and I think we all have hope out of that accomplishment and have a lot to be thankful for. So I'll read the proclamation and then we can have any council comments. So we are making a proclamation observing Juneteenth Independence Day, June 19th, 1865, the day on which slavery finally came to an end in the United States. June 19th, 2021 is our celebration. Whereas President Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation was issued January 1st, 1863, yet news of the end of slavery did not reach the frontier areas of the United States, in particular the southwestern states, for over 2.5 years. And whereas on June 19, 1865, Union soldiers led by Major General Gordon Granger arrived in Galveston, Texas, with news that the Civil War had ended and the enslaved were free. And whereas African Americans who had been enslaved in the Southwest celebrated June 19th, commonly known as Juneteenth Independence Day, as an inspiration and encouragement for future generations. And whereas the Louisville City Council acknowledges the historical significance of Juneteenth Independence Day to the United States, and whereas residents of Louisville are encouraged to join the continued nationwide celebration of Juneteenth Independence Day to provide an opportunity for people of the United States to learn more about the past and to better understand the experiences that have shaped the United States. And whereas the city of Louisville recognizes that the observance of the end of slavery is a part of the history and heritage of the United States. And whereas the city will fly the Juneteenth flag to raise awareness of the celebration. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the City Council of Louisville, Colorado, that June 19th, 2021 is recognized as Juneteenth Independence Day and encourages all residents to join the celebration and solidarity and urges all residents to actively raise their own awareness of the significance of the celebration in African American history and in the heritage of our nation and city, dated the 17th day, June 2021. And Councilmember Dickinson, I'll turn it over to you to let us know where we'll be flying flags and make any other comments you'd like to make.
Thank you, Mayor. I believe we'll be flying a flag at the library. And you can help me. Are we also flying a flag at Community Park?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I was not sure if we had the second one, so very, very excited about both those things. And I'll keep my comments brief, but I just want to say this is a really exciting day for me, my company that I've been a part of for 11 years. This year is the first time we've ever given this day as a paid holiday to our employees, and so everyone has the day off tomorrow. And it was kind of a cascade of events between this proclamation and our choice as a city and the federal decision. It just feels like a lot of things are moving in a positive direction, and I'm really happy to be a part of that huge community and a 100-0 vote in the Senate makes me feel really good. I think it's the right thing, and I'm very excited that we can be observing this tough part of our history. But today isn't the tough part. Today is, or June 19th is the celebration of the end of a tough part, at least as that part of the story is being told. So I'm very, very happy that we've decided to do this in our community. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Dickinson. Councilmember Lay?
Yeah, thank you. That I agree with all that Councilmember Dickinson and you, Mayor, have said about this. It is a very exciting day. And I just learned, as probably many of the rest of you did, that the president just signed off on the legislation a couple of hours ago. And so it is really a watershed moment when I think about and we consider how long it has been, how long it was after the 13th Amendment was passed, that the Emancipation Proclamation was passed, that that word got to people who were affected, and it's the proclamation. I think that's the issue there. But it's been a long time coming, and so it's a good thing that way. What I would also say is we've got, I think, a wonderful effort going on the equity task force that's going to be considering an awful lot of different ways the city can be more welcoming to African Americans and others in the city. And my hope is that we can have our own celebration, not just the day off, but that we'll be able to have a celebration among people in Louisville. In the meantime, there is, I did want to commend and give props to folks in Boulder who, in addition to what the mayor had mentioned, they're putting on a virtual celebration on Saturday at 10. And I think maybe we can find a way to post on our website the information that Boulder released, I think, today about that. So I encourage people to attend that virtual celebration on Saturday, the true Juneteenth. And I'm glad we're issuing this proclamation. So thanks to all who made that happen.
Thank you, Councilmember Lay. Councilmember Brown?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to thank you, Mayor, Councilmember Dickinson, Councilmember Lay, and the entire council for their leadership on this particular proclamation and issue. I want to thank the NAACP for raising this and for working with us in partnership on this, and want to sort of add my voice to the celebration and my support for this proclamation. So thank you.
Thank you. And Councilmember Lay, is that just a residual hand? Thank you. I just wanted to make sure you didn't have any other remarks. Right, thank you, everyone. So thanks all around. Special thanks to Liz, the NAACP, the City of Boulder, the City of Longmont, and the whole area that's making this celebration happen this year. And with that, all those in favor of the proclamation, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. The proclamation passes unanimously. And that takes us to our next item of business on the agenda, which is discussion direction of underpass cost estimates, prioritization, financial considerations, and possible ballot language for potential transportation tax. We'll have a staff presentation, so I'll turn it over to our city manager, Heather Balser.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. And great to see that proclamation. It's wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Just quick, brief comments. I'm going to turn it over to Kurt here in a minute to provide some updated cost numbers. That information went out today. And again, recognizing and some updated design as well, but again, recognizing that design is still only at 10% for most of those underpasses. Then I'm going to just ask Megan Pierce to give a brief update on the conversation that was held at the LRC meeting yesterday and their contribution to support those underpasses in the urban renewal area. And then I'll turn it back over to you, Mayor, so we can hear from council as to their determination as to what we need to hear from you all in terms of dollar amount for the amount you'd like to dedicate towards underpasses, prioritization, and then ultimately preferred ballot language. So I'm going to turn it over to Kurt at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Coer, take it away when you're ready.
Okay, thank you, Heather and Mayor and Council. So I've got my screen shared. I just want to make sure you can all see kind of a spreadsheet of numbers. Is that
Yes.
everybody good? Okay. So I'll be brief, but I just want to start by thanking Kimley Horn regarding land and OTAC for 8 weeks of a lot of hard work. I'm not sure how many of them really slept in the last week or two to get us to this point. So regardless if we move forward on anything or not, I just want to extend a thanks to the team that put all this together. So what's before you is roughly a 10% design in 6 locations and prices applied for our best guesses at this point, including costs for right-of-way or allowances for utilities, and in some cases allowances for adjacent improvements that would integrate the underpass into the areas that we're installing them in. We then took all those 6 locations add up to about $50 million without a contingency. And then we applied a 50% contingency to the cost estimates. And that gets you up to about $68 million. And then I have some columns that suggest what your budget would be if we started building these 2 years from now in 2023 at a 3% inflation, 5%, and 7%. So you can kind of see what our base cost is, what a very high contingency is at this point and appropriate for the point we're at, and then how inflation will impact us. We do have the new location for Bullhead Gulch in this cost estimate, but below this table I have the refreshed cost estimate for the old location on Bullhead Gulch. And I would say they're not quite apples to apples. The prices are close. We had 2 different consultants estimating. So what I would say about Bullhead Gulch is I don't think the price should be the driver here at the kind of the point we're at. It's really, they're close enough in price. The location, the right location should drive that decision on that particular underpass. So
Thanks, Kurt. If you'll just pause right there 1 second, you've already prompted some great questions, and so I'm just going to take those as they come up. Councilmember Dickinson?
Just a question on it says 50% contingency, and then the math isn't working out for me. So if you can just help me with how we get from, roughly 15 million, and then a 50% contingency is only 5 million. I would expect it to be 7. So if you could just help me with how we're getting to that number.
The detailed cost estimates that we put together, some of the line items aren't necessarily in the contingency in the total. And so what I did is I took the total for our cost estimate in the packet. I took the 50% contingency line item in that cost estimate, and I just subtracted it to get to that cost without contingency. So that's why that math isn't a straight.
Okay, I appreciate that.
And that may have been Mayor Pro Tem Maloney's question as well. Is that right? I lost your picture, but I saw your hand before.
He nodded his head, Mayor.
Oh, thank you. Okay, great. Director Coer, please keep going.
Okay, so I know the focus is numbers today, and I don't want to get into the weeds of design. So I want to stop and ask you guys, how do you want to proceed from here when you talk about the high level numbers? Would you like me to quickly present each design, include you into how we ended the story on each design, or do you want to just stop here at numbers for now?
I think council members, if you could go through the locations and a very high level of the design where the team ended up, I think that would be a useful exercise so that we can have a better understanding of how people are ranking them when we get to that point in the meeting. Is that all right with everybody? Great.
Give me 1 second. I'm fighting with Windows here. So we'll start with Main Street and South Boulder Road. This is the most difficult location by far. We took input from the last time we spoke, and people were wanting it to try to ramp up to the street in both directions. We were trying to figure out how to squeeze it within properties. We worked with the business owners in this area to discuss what works for them or not. And ultimately what we came up with was an underpass that comes through South Boulder Road straight into a T and then ramps up to the west through like the horseshoe and comes up to a plaza in front of the bank. This does take half of the existing bank. The bank had indicated to us kind of late in the design process that they only needed half of their square footage. Their building was too big for their business model. And so that's why you see this come into play. And then we ramp up to the traffic signal to the existing crossing so that in a way people are served whether they're coming from the east or west. The Fear and Piers design that we had worked with wasn't a bad design, but it didn't necessarily ramp up in a way. We thought we heard folks wanted it to ramp up more to the west. And unfortunately, when we do that, there's a right in, right out there now. And if you go stand out there and just take in that area, people are whipping in on that right in, right out. It's not a corner that's a safe place just to plop people up to. So ramping up to that right in, right out is a bad situation. And then also we had stairs going up to that location out of the original concept. And again, it just didn't feel like we were putting people into a great spot. It wasn't going to be a great experience, especially if we're thinking all ages and abilities. So anyways, on Main Street, that idea just kind of grew and got bigger. We've pounded our heads in this area, but the design that you guys are looking at is the design that once we all saw it, we said, this feels like this is the right thing to do in this location. Is it the cheapest thing to do? No. Can we back this off? Absolutely. But this is where Main Street landed. That ended up with roughly $15 million for the baseline budget without contingency. We did include roughly $400,000 in this budget to make a wider sidewalk on the west side of Main from South Boulder Road down to Griffith, just to provide a strong pathway into downtown. This really keeps us out of the railroad right away as well, except for the small part by the signal. Some things that we're trying to do in this design, I'll just go down to this exhibit. You can kind of see the 3D nature at the bottom of the screen here. But we are looking at how can we integrate with the buildings with this underpass, and perhaps on the cyclery, there's an opportunity to do an integrated wall with the underpass that creates some storefront look. We're also keeping in mind, return on investment in this area and how can you activate this north side, and then there's also a thought of how can you activate the south side depending on the zoning that's there, whether it's residential or there's been ideas of commercial thrown around. So I'll stop at Main Street and let you kind of comment where we're at on that design with the $15 million.
So I just want to encourage, we don't have to have the designs finalized this evening. They can go through all our boards and things like that for further review, and we can obviously value engineer things as we go. But I just think it's important to hear from Kurt where the team landed and then ask any questions about it. But we don't actually have to finalize any decisions about the designs tonight. Is that right, Kurt?
Absolutely. We have a year to year and a half of design after this point if you move things forward. So maybe to reframe the question, how do you feel about $15 million in this location to get the right design?
Right. And also just be thinking, council members, that we're going to, at the end of the day, come up with a dollar amount and a prioritization list. So any questions that you have to help you answer those questions. Councilmember Lipton.
Thank you. Kurt, you mentioned that there were some less elegant designs that could result in a lower cost for this underpass. Could you kind of talk us through that?
Yeah, so I think we'll just stick with this image and look at where it says Louisville Cyclery, and you've kind of got that area parallel to the road. So the previous design would have steps up to where the car is there and drop people in that right in, right out area on the corner. And then it would still ramp up to the traffic signal. So you'd essentially get half of the underpass that's proposed here. I think that was still about a $10 million number when we were looking at that, $8 to $10 million. So if you reduced it, then what you would not have is this horseshoe ramp up kind of more towards the west. And then you eliminate the need to go under the right in, right out. I think we just really felt like in any situation, we just don't want to put people and cars in conflict at an underpass where the goal is to not have people in conflict with cars. So that's why we chose to go under the right in, right out.
So tell me a little bit more about the stairs, because I'm a little confused
Yeah.
about.
If you can see where there's a yellow car, the previous version had stairs that came up from the underpass and kind of dropped in at the curve right here. Can you see the arrow moving on my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, so there would have been on the previous Fear and Piers version, there would have been stairs coming up right here. And then we would have just dropped people on this corner with stairs. And if you're coming through on the underpass, you would have just continued up on a smooth grade to the traffic signal. So you could ramp up to the east, or you could take stairs up to the west. And in either case, we were bringing people through the right in, right out.
So you couldn't ramp up to the west? The only option would be for people to take stairs?
So this is the version, what we're looking at right now is an enhancement on the previous concept where we are ramping to the east, and what you just said, we are ramping up to the west to take people west. So we ramp up in both directions, east and west, and we're going under the right in, right out. So there's no conflict with people and cars.
In the previous version, to go to the west, you would go up the east ramp, and then you would have gone on that 3-foot sidewalk on the road on your bike.
Right.
That would be the version in the Fay and Pierce version.
Correct. And we felt that wasn't good either. If kids were coming home and they were heading to the east, we're bringing them up, and then we're asking them to make kind of a 180-degree turn in kind of a tight situation against a busy road. And that just didn't feel like that was the right thing to do. So this one is the smoothest way to get anybody east or west. Yes, there's a slight offset as we curve up, but again, no one has to get around cars to come up and then go to the west and go up into the neighborhood. Obviously, if you have to cross Centennial, there's a traffic signal crossing there. But as far as this area in Maine, you can come under and go east and you never touch traffic. And you can come under and go west and you never touch traffic. And we've gotten rid of all conflicts with cars.
Councilmember Lipton, does that answer your questions at this time?
Yeah, it does. And what was the cost premium for this, for the new solution?
$15 million versus the other one is probably 8 to 10.
So it costs, what, 6 or 7 million more to do this?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney? Oh, you're muted.
Does that work?
Yes.
Okay. I had a hardware issue. When we talk about the cost of these things, given the fact that I know this is a rough statement, we're roughly a 10% design for these. I would like to propose that we use the cost, including the contingency, because otherwise I don't believe we're using the right number. So I understand what you're talking about. This particular one, it's $15 million, but I look at it as $20 million we added a contingency. Thank you.
Thank you for that reminder, Mayor Pro Tem Maloney. Any other questions on this one before we learn about the concept on the next? All right, take it away, Kurt.
Okay. Next is South Street. So feedback we heard in this area, I think anyone that looked at this area strongly felt like it should line up with South, or we had the alignment on the north. We put the team on bikes for a day in Louisville, and we were biking in this area for about an hour up and down the Woonerf and watching things and just thinking about if you came out South Street and went up Cannon, that's what I call the Woonerf because that's what it's called. And then you went to that alignment that was the red line on the north the last time we talked. We just felt that even though it kind of looked good on paper, it wasn't good once you're on the street. And that's not the trend. The trend is not to put people in cars together. And we just felt if you spent a ton of money and then dumped people into Cannon Street sharing with cars, that we kind of felt like we just get some lashback of you just built this nice underpass and now you want us to ride down the middle of a road. to get us, and you're trying to get us out of a road. So we focused on South Street. And talking with TIBO, they really don't want their pads impacted. They don't want their south entrance impacted, but we prioritized their pad. And as we just looked at things and tried to figure out how to make it work, we could have squeezed something in the front of TIBO Plaza where the landscape is, and we looked at that last time together. But we felt like it was just going to be kind of a half solution for people. And if we squeeze part way in the South Street, we're going to have a half solution for people, a half solution for cars. We said, all right, what do we do if we're just going to do it right? The right thing would make South Street just a plaza through. Try to create a different space where the parking lot that kind of creates a kind of a one-way circle that we would extend Lee Street into, and that would create a smoother traffic flow and integrate for the second entrance for TIBO. And then it kind of starts to really more activate that area. And then maybe that's ROI on your investment because it activates that area more. Or TIBO may say in this one that it kills his business by having that south entrance closed. That's a loop that we got to close with them. But we went for it on South. We said, let's just line it up. Let's prioritize pedestrians. And so that's what you're looking at. That solution with contingency is about 9. Or I'm sorry, I'm just adding the 2 lines. Is about $13 million. $4 million of that is that green urban open space area. So that doesn't necessarily have to happen with the underpass, but I wanted to make sure I pointed out that cost if that integration were to occur. In the event that rail comes, and in the event the city still chooses to have rail at this South Street location, this circular one-way thing that we've created, couplet, can then act as kind of the bus route that comes in and acts as your kiss and ride for buses to drop off to the rail. So I'm not suggesting rail will still be here, but in the event it was, then this plays into that design well and takes advantage of the other assets we've invested in the area. So I'll stop at South Street and answer any questions for South.
Thank you, Director Coer. Councilmember Lay.
Thanks, Director Coer. I just wanted to make a suggestion, actually. As you're going through this, I know for us as council members, we are familiar with these documents because we've seen versions of them before, but the public may not be, and they may not be quite as familiar with the locations that you're pointing to. And I wonder if you could use your pointer. Maybe you're doing it, but I don't see it on mine. And if you could, as you're going through each of these, that's helpful. And you know, when you're referring to Mr. TIBO, you're talking about the property owner. And anybody who's probably spent an enormous amount of time on this is going to know that, but not necessarily everybody who's tuned in. So thanks. That's all.
Thanks, Councilmember Lay. Mayor Pro Tem Maloney.
Thank you, Mayor. So, Kurt, we're basically closing South Street. Is that correct? I mean, we're putting a tunnel there and now it's a pedestrian bike tunnel.
Yes, that's what this is envisioning.
Okay, and just to the south of South Street, if you will, and that diagram is where the ball field is. So how would people access the ball field and where would they park?
You know, that's a situation that we haven't fully covered in this concept that I was going to point out. So we would need to look at parking is provided. We've still provided car parking by the couplet. There is still some parking along Lee. Perhaps you can create a different type of head-in parking along Lee. Maybe there's ways for us to modify just this concept to keep parking closer, or perhaps there's with the property owner, TIBO, maybe there's a reciprocal parking agreement that could take place. And then if there's any like big events, there's always, you can use the underpass to go to the ball field parking. So we haven't vetted that part completely. This was a big step just to say we would close it, and we wanted to see what that reaction was. And this is the most expensive way to go about it. So if we have to back it off, we knew we were being conservative.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this? Councilmember Dickinson.
I just want to say, I mean, I think it's a very bold design. I'm conflicted on it, but as we said, we have lots of time to still fine tune these designs, and I appreciate that you brought something bold. I think turning South Street into a pedestrian area entirely, yeah, I think it's the best. That's a pretty bold choice, and then yeah, it comes with some consequences on how to deal with the parking in the ball field and all of that. But it's definitely pedestrian and bike focused. I think that's great. But yeah, I'm conflicted on it, but I appreciate the presentation.
Thanks, Councilmember Dickinson. Councilmember Lay.
Thanks, Mayor. Just to be clear, as we're looking over let's see, the crossing, there's Lee Avenue. There's no crossing, or is there a crossing there?
There would be a traffic crossing at Lee Avenue. The Lee Avenue would come straight up all the way to Short.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think with Councilmember Dickinson spoke to some of the concerns that I have. I think this one certainly would need some substantial community input about the impacts on residents, as well as the economic impacts on that pad and that area in there. And by the way, I forget who the owner is of the southeast part, or it would be the north, just north and east of the pad that is unused right now, along South Street and 42. If you look down at that, yeah, right, just above where you are.
Right here?
Yes.
I do not know what the ownership is there. I believe it is the entire property owner, Tebow's.
Yeah, because I know that one is not yet developed. Anyway, good. I appreciate all the hard work that's gone into this. And by the way, just generally, because I know you guys have been working, and everybody who's been involved in this has worked really hard to try to get this to us. Realize we don't have to get to design right now. You'd indicated this is the most expensive design, which I think maybe for our purposes will help us at least define the edge case, as they say, or the outer bound. So thanks.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Lipton.
Thank you. Kurt, if we asked you to value engineer or come up with a different design that would save money for this particular underpass, what would you do differently?
I think you could rethink this urban open space that I priced in on a separate line item in the table on the first page, and we would still need to bring Lee Avenue through in some way and restripe the existing parking lot, but that green bulb area is, I think, about $4 million. And then we could rethink just some of the periphery things we would do to place make in the Brown area. And then perhaps if you really just said not South Street value engineer, I think the only other solution we were able to come up with is we just, at this corner, we would ramp down and then go through the frontage of the Tebow property and then come over and connect. So it could just be just a plain connection, and not try to do any type of place making or bigger thought. So I think that is a progression I would probably take depending on where your comfort levels were.
Thanks. I guess for several of these, I'm looking more at functionality than I am for making a grand statement. So I appreciate understanding better for each one what the options are. So this one goes way beyond functionality. It's a beautiful design, but there's also probably, well, I would guess $6 million in additional costs by going to that next level that you went to. So, that's just another option we can be looking at in terms of, trying to maintain functionality, but without so much glamour on some of these. Thanks.
Thanks, Councilmember Lipton. And just to add on to what Councilmember Dickinson was saying, I really appreciate that staff and the consultants put together like bold options and made the ability for us to make choices as we go forward, just like Councilmember Lipton's saying. And so having sort of the high end framing this helps us understand, where we might end up. And then I just want to confirm my understanding of what you said, Director Coer, that if we wanted to have an option that maintained South Street as a street to serve that commercial plaza in the neighborhood, is there a feasible way to bring the underpass under 42 and still enable South Street as a street?
Yes, there is. It would be that alignment that's kind of along the Tebow frontage.
Okay.
Cross.
Thank you. And so those kinds of details could go through, the Revitalization Commission and our other public bodies as we refine the exact details in the next, year and a half or so. Is that what you're thinking?
Absolutely. In every one of these designs, we have to go through a process with the community and the appropriate boards.
Great. Councilmember Lipton?
Yeah, I had one other question on this underpass, Kurt. I think that we had some early discussions about trying to time this to be coincidental with the other work that would be done on Highway 42. Is that entered into your thinking and your numbers?
Yeah, I think we'll be ahead of whatever improvements we would do on Highway 42. So the road would widen to the east, and we've left that room for the road to widen to the east. And then also where we come out, where you see a curve here, what we're really planning for is that ultimately would be a T. So when the rest of the corridors improve, this becomes a T, and then it would be a multi-purpose trail going south to Pine. So we have done the forward thinking, but I don't think the Highway 42 improvements will be sequential with our improvements because we'll be moving faster.
We will be moving faster than they will?
Yeah, I think Highway 42 corridor improvements are a 5 to 10 year project, and depending on how fast council would like to move, I'm trying to make this a 2-year project.
And what's the cost premium for getting ahead of the Highway 42 project? I'm assuming the road will be largely torn up. There'll be a lot of, mobilization, flaggers, the whole thing. So we would essentially do that, and then they would come behind us and, cause all that commotion again.
At some point, yes. Yes, that would happen. We would cut through the road in this area, right in line with South. Or if we did the lesser option, it'd be somewhere here mid-block. We would cut through the road and patch that back. And then when the corridor came through, then you would do additional paving on the east side. And depending on the timing, maybe there's another overlay on 42.
Okay, thanks.
Councilmember Fahey?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I'm wondering now with these estimates, the cost estimates that you're giving us with the contingency, this is for the very highest design that you've done. Is that right?
Yep, we've taken a do it right approach, go for the highest design, and we're providing really one of the highest contingencies you would use at 50%.
Okay, and so if we were to approve all of these, we would come up with how much money?
If I'm using the 50% contingency and we approve all these as we've estimated them today, then you would need roughly to build in 2 years with inflation, let's say at 5%, $75 million.
75, wow. All right, but if we get the 75 million approved somehow, either on the ballot or through our own financial means, that would be the highest amount that it would cost us. So conceivably, if we decide, well, we don't want to do that one at the highest level, or we don't want to do this one at all, or whatever, it would cost less than the 75 million. Is that right?
Yes, you can mix and match and reduce designs. And again, we're using a 50% contingency.
Right.
So as you get closer to full design, that'll drop to maybe like 10 or 20%.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Coer. If you want to move on to the next location to tell us a little bit about that.
Yep. Okay, this is Via Appia. We had previously had Via Appia over the underpass, trying to come over the ditch and then under the road and back up to Via Appia. We're going to constrain Via Appia, try to line it up with transit and just the Via Appia alignment in general. You know, and we were really bought into that. And then we spent some time just looking at everything in the park and better understanding the grades on site. And we felt like where this really wants to go to provide the best regional trail experience with connections to transit, but not in line with transit, would be coming along the east side of the park. There's just a ditch and kind of a gorgeous ravine in here. The way the grades play out, if you're coming south along the trail and you start to dip down and you go under the road, you actually come out and it's going to open up to the park, and it's not really going to be buried because the park actually drops away from the road in this area quite a bit. So it's almost like you're not coming out of a hole on this side. And we felt for all these reasons that just felt like the right thing to do. One of the signature things that we made a decision to do here is, as you can see, it looks pretty wide. And in this area, you have 3 parks connected together. You have the Lake Park, you have the Cottonwood Park, and then north to south Boulder Road. I can't remember the name of the other park, but there's tennis courts and whatnot up there. But you have an opportunity to do something that's wide that almost kind of connects this corridor in a greenway sort of way. So it's more of just less of just a concrete box and feels more of like an opening that maybe both people and wildlife would use. So it's more of a bridge approach than a box approach. So I'll stop there, and that's where we landed on Via Appia. And Via Appia with contingency came up to 14 million. And I think we had previously, for a very bare bones basic approach that came up more of the middle of the park, the Fair and Piers hadn't done detailed estimating, but they said in round numbers it might cost 7 million.
Thanks, Director Kohler. And I know, we've said we don't have to design everything tonight. Just I think some of the concrete over the playground areas and some of the expansion of the parking area is excessive, but it's a beautiful design in general. Any other questions or comments on this one? Councilmember Lipton?
Thanks. Kurt, it was a little unclear to me in the cost estimating sheets. The area on the green area on the north side, yeah, all of that. How much of that is included in the project budget?
I don't have that breakout memorized. I'm working with this almost as real time as you are. I would imagine there's a couple 100,000 in there for water quality and features.
Okay, so, but that is included in the cost estimates.
Yes.
Yeah, I think if I remember, it was about 400,000 in landscaping and stuff like that. Does that?
Yeah, I mean, some of that's going to be on the south side too. So, and we can, these allowances can be moved everywhere. So like if you didn't do all the sidewalk on the south side, then you could, put more on the north side. We felt that north side really it's functional, but it's kind of an eyesore. And there's an opportunity to connect the apartments and the corridor and the homes in a really nice way that integrates the underpass and all those areas to give them something to activate that space, and it can still be functional. We felt like if we didn't do that, we were just maybe turning our backs on something.
So Kurt, who owns, with a small O, that land? Is it Public Works? Is it open space? Is it parks? Is
a
it
big
nobody?
chunk of it is open space and or parks, and then some of it is apartment.
None of it is zoned open space, so none of it is open space.
So maybe it's parks and,
Yeah, I'd have to look at I'd have to talk with our internal staff to really delineate it. I'm just telling you my observations when I see it out there, but it may not be technically the right description. So.
Okay, thanks.
This could be a beautiful one. It could be a game changer. I'll just say that. So I'll keep going if anyone wants, unless anyone's got something.
It was Councilmember Fahey.
Thank you. Yes, one question is, how is this going to allow for access from the mobile home park down either to cross South Boulder Road, but also to get into Cottonwood Park? And how can they get down to the entrance on the south side of the underpass?
That's a good question. So the mobile home park right now has an exit. They have a surface crossing right here via Appia. Anybody has a surface crossing, but this is one corner of the park. And then if you go further to the south and west, you're going to get down to Via Capri. And so there's an intersection there. So this trail comes down and it connects and it would carry through. And then this is going to continue on and end up kind of down by the bridge area, down by Via Capri. And so they would still they would access the park at the same spot, come through the park like they would today, and then they'd pick up this new trail and come through, or this new trail here, I'm sorry, come through. So
Okay,
I don't think it changes much of how they get through there now.
right, right.
And then we can always do treatments at Via Capri to make that crossing more friendly, like we've done with Pine Street type things and Cherry.
All right, thank you.
Great. Let's look at the next one. Thanks, Kurt.
You're welcome. Sorry, I dropped Main Street in there twice, so just ignore that. There's just some pretty pictures of the park if you want to check those out, but we've got to work with the parks boards to help understand when we walk out of the park that we leave it looking good, but what does looking good look like? So this is we'll call it the new Bullhead Gulch. And this one's just pretty plain Jane connection. You're just coming right under the railroad and connects in with the north-south trail there. This is in line with the trail coming from the Highway 42 underpass. The bulb out in this area, Steel Ranch, is kind of right here. If you kept going south, I don't have it on the map. And this one was coming in with the contingency at about 5.8 million. And again, it's pretty similar in cost, I think, after it's fully designed to what the other Bullhead Gulch location would be. So the only downfall of this one, I think it's a better location. I like what we came up with. The only downfall is when we move the location with the railroad, I don't know what kind of problems they'll cause us, but I don't think it's a reason not to move it at this point.
Any questions from folks? All right, thanks, Director Carr. Let's look at the next one.
All right, here we are at Dillon Road. So Dillon Road's a good one. It's a little tough on the north side because as we're trying to come up from under the road, the grade of everything there keeps just going up and up and up. So you have to chase it for quite a ways. And then once you get to grade, we're bringing it back to the road. So that's a pretty long shot there. When you get to the other side, we're just trying to integrate and make for a smooth trail experience for the Coal Creek Trail. This one does anticipate taking the concrete all the way to US 36. There is a very wide road here that's owned by the bank. It just serves when they come out of their ATM and teller auto spots, just serves as an exit. Right now it's pretty large 2-lane road, so we are looking to encroach and narrow their exit, which we don't think will be a big impact. And we've got like a wall in here just to pick up grade, but that's essentially Dillon. We're not doing anything fancy there. It just takes a lot of room to get up and down in this area, and there's a few utilities and stormwater things to deal with. So Dillon is at the contingency level, $9.6 million. Any questions on that?
Nope, thank you, Director Carr.
Okay. And then last but not least is South Boulder Road in 42. Again, this one's pretty straightforward. There is on the south side, there's an irrigation ditch and siphon that we need to deal with. And then on the north side, we're trying to stay within our right-of-way and minimize the right-of-way we need to get easements on or purchase and stay out and not impact Burger King as much. You do lose a lot of parking right in here. The reason it wiggles is when we wiggle, it gets longer and therefore it helps us to get up to grade. And so we're trying to get up to grade before we get to the egress and ingress for the shopping center. But that's essentially what's going on with this underpass. It's, again, this one's pretty straightforward. I know we've had comments that people may want to see it, you know, go east or west or have one on both sides. I just can't really comment on how to prioritize that for the community. You could pivot this and go possibly east-west if you felt like that was a stronger connection. I mean, ultimately it would lead you to Main Street if you built that, and then you'd have a smooth experience into downtown from there. So if you pivot it, it'd probably still be in the same ballpark. And overall, this one was $5.4 million.
Councilmember Lipton.
Kurt, on this one, you mentioned the loss of parking. Where would that occur?
Right. So at the Burger King right here, there's parking along this outside. So you'd lose just basically the Burger King parking area for some of it. It looks like it'd be maybe 20 to 30 spots possibly. I think, I don't want to represent planning, but I think in terms of parking, planning feels like that capacity would be okay to lose. We have not talked with Burger King yet though, so I want to point that out.
Yeah, so where is the drive-through for Burger King?
Can
you point to it?
It's right here.
Yeah, I'm not sure if there is parking that's west of that. Is that what you're talking about, going west?
West of it, yeah, there is parking. I can see it. You can kind of, here, let me zoom in. You can see the lines barely. See it right there?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you'd be losing those parking spots, but you still have access for the drive-through, and you still have plenty of room to drive around. And you know, I mean, we could still, if we put in more walls for the project, then you could preserve the parking, but that gets pretty expensive.
Does Burger King actually own that parcel, do you know?
No, actually, you can see right here the property line for Burger King is they just own just basically their building.
Okay.
Councilmember Lipton, does that answer your questions on this one?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Okay. So I feel like that concludes each location. I'm just going to zoom back to the table on the first page for you guys to absorb, but you're now informed at what's included in your costs and what it looks like. And just to reiterate, there's still a long ways to go. There's a lot we probably haven't identified. We're working with big contingencies. If you move this process forward, we still have a lot of outreach to do with the community and different boards when we're allowed to do that. There's a certain time frame where we have to go quiet during the ballot measure. So we'll just have to figure those things out. But this is certainly not the last time that people would weigh in on any of this.
Thank you so much, Director Kohler. This is a ton of work that you've put together to help us understand, you know, what could be realized in these different locations and to give us, you know, some graphics, cost estimates and all of that. And the amount of effort you've put into this is incredible. And we thank you so much. This is awesome. So I think next up in the presentation, we'll hear from Megan Pierce about how the LRC meeting went and Councilmember Lay, as well as our representative to the committee.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. So the Louisville Revitalization Commission's June 16th materials are linked in your packet for this evening. Just very briefly, it included a financial update and projections for the remaining life of the Highway 42 urban renewal area. 3 of the 6 contemplated underpass improvements are located within that urban renewal area. And the LRC has a history of cooperating with the city on infrastructure improvements of this nature, including the South Street Underpass and Gateway. So in summary of yesterday, LRC is supportive of Council's underpass initiatives and directed staff to develop a cooperation agreement, which will be reviewed at a special meeting on June 30th. The direction included annual funding contributions between 2023 and 2032, totaling $13.75 million. The contributions would be 1.25 million in the years between 2023 and 2027, and then increase to 1.5 million in years 2028 through 2032. The change in contributions relates to when it is anticipated the LRC will pay off the core area bonds. The LRC also provided direction in terms of prioritization of projects for inclusion in the cooperation agreement. The LRC suggests that the first priority project within the urban renewal area is the underpass at Main and South Boulder Road, and that the second priority project within the URA is the underpass at Highway 42 and South Street. I'm happy to answer any questions about the discussion from yesterday or what we'll be preparing for June 30th.
Thank you, Director Pierce. Councilmember Lay, would you like to add?
Briefly, Director Pierce did a nice job of summarizing discussion. I think what I took away from yesterday's discussion, and the chair of the LRC, at least as I last saw it, is in the wings here, and she may weigh in, but I was very impressed with our decision yesterday. It's a heavy lift for the LRC to come up with that kind of money, in the sense that there are other priorities. There are likely to be priorities that we don't know about in the future. And this is, I think, at some level, a statement of faith. And they are very excited, almost to a person, about this project. We had some discussions about what kind of help and in what form they might provide it. There was some talk of providing money at the end rather than at the beginning, and I myself and others encouraged steady contribution, which obviously reduces the risk and improves our capacity to bond. There's another thing, though, in line, well, and there were discussions about different levels of funding too, and I think concern about what the revenue numbers that were provided to us showed for the first couple of years, and that's why the first payment would be due in 2023, and then of course paying off their bonds will leave some additional money available to kick in. But there also is some sense that if there is money later left over at the very end of this process, that there could be some discussion about perhaps providing some of that to help pay off or provide to us to help pay off these bonds that we're talking about. And I thought that was a nice suggestion. It goes to it goes really to the level of cooperation that I think we have. And I just parenthetically, I've tried to foster, and I know Director Pierce has tried to foster, as well as the other staff, more collaborative effort on what is a transformative project. And I think we're doing that. I think the Mayor Pro Tem has said a number of times that there is something lost in our not having had discussions, met with the LRC last year as we usually do. There was also a discussion to suggest that perhaps more often than once, and perhaps more often than just meet and greet, that we can have meetings, perhaps on the model that we had on the 25th of May, but substantive meetings about priorities and places where our relative interests overlap. So anyway, I wanted to provide that information as well because I think it gives a taste of how enthusiastic the support actually is. And I want to thank everybody on the LRC for stepping up and providing that kind of money, and with a mind also to ensuring that there is money available to do other kinds of projects that are important for the LRC to plan on, even though they don't know exactly where that money is going to go during the next few years. So anyway, any questions? I mean, I'm glad to answer them, but thanks to Director Pierce particularly for a lot of good work, and the rest of folks who helped to provide materials to the LRC to help make decisions. So thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Lay, and thank you to the whole LRC for working so hard on this on our timeline. It's a big lift, I know, and we'll have a lot more work to do over the course of the next year and a half, hopefully, if we're successful in being able to deliver these improvements to the community. So thank you so much just for starting to work with us. That's awesome. Any questions for Councilmember Lay or for Director Pierce? All right. Councilmember Lay, is that a legacy again? No, it is not. Councilmember Lay.
It isn't. I wanted to gotten a heads up from the chair. I think the two, I'm not sure that there was a priority set between the top two priorities, but there is a priority of the top two. Let's put it, the two that that were discussed. South Street and Main Street and South Boulder Road together are above and away the most important for the LRC.
Thank you, Councilmember Lay and Lexi, both. Any other questions or comments on that point? All right, so I think it takes it to council will be deliberating on the question of prioritization of which underpasses. What is the priority order, because we may not be able to afford them all looking at these updated costs. And then on that question of cost is what is the amount that council wants to see brought forward in July for a figure for the max that we're comfortable looking at bonding against. So that's what we'll be discussing. But before we get to that, I'd like to give the members of the public an opportunity to give us their input on this agenda item this evening. So we have a good turnout, and if any members of the public would care to comment on this agenda item, this is your opportunity to do so. And if you dialed in by phone, you can dial *9 to raise your hand, and if you're logging on the computer, you'll find the raise hand feature at the bottom of your screen. And first up, we have Rick Crum. Hey, Rick.
All right. Good evening. Mayor, Council. Real quick comment off top. Thanks for approving the street fair contract amendment. That really helps us. By the way, we have Hot Buttered Rum as our 7th band, so we do have a full lineup now. Well, my general comment is that this is a lot of money. As the business community will be opposed to a new mill levy, partly because of the disparate impact on them due to the difference in the assessed valuation ratio. However, I believe we're okay with bonding using existing resources. I wanted to point out that $50 million is approximately $2,380 per resident without the interest carry. So this is a lot of money and a big decision on your part. I'd like to comment particularly on the Main Street South Boulder Road underpass. The 2-ramp solution at an $8 to $10 million premium sounds very expensive, and generally agree with the comments that Councilman Lipton was making and his concern about the need for value engineering at that location. The South Street underpass, eliminating the parking, in addition to the ball fields problem and the residents problem, that area is also used for downtown events, for parking for downtown events, such as the street fair. And we do try to divert traffic over to there to try to make sure that we have enough parking and keep it out of the neighborhoods. I think loss of that parking would probably be a bigger problem than is currently anticipated in the plan. There also appears to be substantial utility relocation at that place, especially the storm sewer, and this has been a difficult area for storm sewers in the past. The Via Appia location, I want to ask real quickly, will lowering the sewer line create the need for a lift station there? My suspicion is probably not, but I did notice that there were, again, substantial utility relocations. The Bullhead Gulch, congratulations, get it done, get it done, get it done. The South Boulder Road and Highway 42 underpass on the east side doesn't seem like the best location, given that most of Louisville is on the west side. It may be very difficult to do it on the west side, given the commercial development that's already there, but I think that really needs to be an item that you take a hard look at. Again, support bonding in a low interest rate environment. Hopefully there will still be a low interest rate environment at the time these bonds are actually put on the market. Again, with the existing resources, but do not support a new property tax for this purpose. Thank you very much. That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other members of the public care to comment on this agenda item this evening? Our next commenter is Andy Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council members. It's a real pleasure to listen to this presentation. It really highlights how strong our staff is. I would like to provide compliments to Director Cower for all the work that he's done. I think that it's very unique to have a public works director who could act almost equally as a planner and designer. Very unique situation. I think the work and the team that he has put together is quite tremendous, clearly from the documents put together. And it's kind of unfortunate that we didn't get to see all the designs because they are intriguing. And I think the diagrams and imagery that were created are equally as important as the number of figures that we're talking about. We are talking about making connections through Louisville, but also regional connections that we are really desperately needing. As an architect, of course, I'm very intrigued and very interested in seeing these connections happen on a large scale throughout town, so we don't continue to have islands in our communities where we are separated by busy roads, by visual and physical barriers, and we start to really unify the town. And I think we also send a really strong message that our access through town is not vehicle driven, but is pedestrian and bicycle focused as well. Something that we are missing, and I really appreciate council for pushing for this to happen. I think that in general, when we look at big projects like this, there's been a lot of deferred kind of work in this general category, and so this is going to be expensive. I think it's worth it. I think that these connections are what bring our community together. We have a tendency to go with what works rather than what's beautiful, rather than what is really engaging for our community. So I would encourage, as this process moves forward, assuming that it will move forward, given voter support and continued higher level support, that we really do focus on making these real centerpieces rather than utilitarian aspects to our transportation around town. So again, thank you, and thank you to staff for a really great presentation.
Thank you, Andy. Any other comments this evening? All right, thanks folks for taking the time to attend and comment and help us with your feedback. It's very much appreciated. And that takes us to council discussion, questions and comments. Would folks, just sort of as a show, would folks feel more comfortable prioritizing the order first or talking about an amount that people feel comfortable moving forward for our August discussion first? Mayor Pro Tem Maloney?
I don't know if I'm comfortable. Either way, I think it's fine. But when we talk about cost, I guess I have a question and clarification for Director Coer. Early on in this discussion, I was talking about today's cost with contingency, and you kind of moved us over to the 2023 cost with 5% of inflation. I want to make sure that when we start talking about numbers, that we're all talking about the same numbers and that we all agree upon which of these columns we're looking at. So Director, I was wondering if you could voice your opinion as we talk about numbers, where your comfort level is. And I thought I heard with the 5% inflation.
Director Carr?
I think I'll start with inflation. I don't know how to call this one, honestly, with the way market dynamics are. Right now, I think month by month, it's 5 to 10%. And I don't know if that cools off and goes back to more of what we would have thought was a 3 to 5%, which we've seen on some of our bigger commodity-driven contracts like paving. So I guess right now I will say the sweet spot based off the past, I would be at 5%, but there's a lot of unknowns. I would also say, let's just pretend like we don't know everything. And so if you start with cost without contingency, and let's say as we design further, you go up 10% more, but ultimately you've designed all the way to bid to construction, and now you needed contingency with all your knowns of 10 or 20%, then your contingencies may be more like, overall from today to the time you bid, your contingency is probably more like 20 to 30%. So I think there's inflation, and I think there's how you look at contingency. And I think right now we're very conservative.
It looks like City Manager Balser may want to add on to that. City Manager Balser?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that we also have Kevin Watson, our finance director, and Jim Neer, our financial advisor, on the line. And again, I think ultimately, just to get to the bottom line here, you got to pick a number, and then your expectation is you try to complete so many with the expectation that we'll bid for a number of them and see where the final numbers come in. So there's some exactitude we're not going to get to here. So and want to let you know we have other folks on the line who can assist as well.
Thanks, City Manager Balser. Mayor Pro Tem Maloney, did that answer your question?
He provided some clarification, but I think that we as a group, we as a council need to agree upon which column we're using.
Right. So I think I heard Director Coer say that we need to use the numbers that include the 50% contingency when we're looking at this, because we're only at 10% design. So that's why he's included that. Is that your understanding, Mayor Pro Tem Maloney?
I think he hedged his bets a little more than that.
Well, I think he was just giving us the inflation number so we could see that column as well. But
sure,
does it make you comfortable if we use that with the number with the contingency built in?
I'm fine with that. I just want to make sure we're all starting from the same place. So yes.
Right. And then just what City Manager Balser was saying was, you know, what we'll prioritize a list of things. And let's say we all agree on a figure. We'll bid it and we'll try to get as many of them done on the priority list as fit into the figure that we can agree on as a reasonable amount given the different financial scenarios we've all run. I mean, the goal would be to do them all, but if there's a financial reality that we can't get all the way down the list, then you go as far down the prioritized list as you can get. Does that make sense to folks? I'm seeing a lot of very still faces. Okay, Councilmember Lipton, I don't know if you were reacting to my first question on which order to have the discussion in, or if you had another different point.
I do. I just have some comments that I want to put on the table, and I don't know how it then integrates into the conversation. So, okay. And then I would encourage other council members, if they have comments, either like mine or, you know, different or whatever, they should weigh in before we get into actually setting numbers. But, you know, I'm very concerned that we have not hit the sweet spot between functionality and the elegance of design. And I guess I really do disagree with Mr. Johnson's comments that, you know, we should do the most elegant we possibly can, notwithstanding what the cost may turn out to be. I mean, to me, you know, we pride ourselves on small town values. I mean, I keep hearing that at least every election year. And I think part of the small town value is looking for, you know, the best value for the cost and investment we're going to make. And I think there are a few of these projects that may not functionally be the best scenarios that we should be considering, and the costs have been escalating because of that. I think certainly the Highway 42 underpass is one of some concern to me, because I think it assumes that, certain things about road closures and, parking, timing, getting ahead of, the regional work that's going to be done on Highway 42. And knowing that there are other equally, if not more functional designs that we could be looking at a significant cost savings. So I'm just using that one as an example. But anyway, I think I'd like to hear from the rest of you on that sort of issue, because I think the package that we have in front of us is considerably more expensive than I could probably get behind right now.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Councilmember Lipton. So I think Councilmember Lipton laid out a nice process there where folks could give general comments, and then we can get into perhaps ranking them in an order, and really getting to the point that Councilmember Lipton has laid out there of, what is a reasonable amount given all the different financial scenarios we've each run on our own to go forward and ask to bond against, given the commitments from the LRC and our council commitment of 1.5 million a year from the CIP. Councilmember Dickinson.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, obviously, I think, depending on the order you do things, it does matter. if you start with a number and we say the number is 20,000, the prioritization goes pretty quickly. Or sorry, 20 million. 20,000, yeah, would be would be done. And so, I think setting a number is important to really inform the decision on the priority. And then I think I really, again, I think we're all very impressed with the work that the city has done, and Director Coer's whole staff for all the work that was done. What I'm seeing in the numbers is, hey, here's the most expensive underpass we could do there, and here's 50% cost on top of that, and here's inflation on top of that. And so I see that as a number that we shouldn't get to. That's if we do the most expensive design and we have a bunch of contingencies and we have inflation. And so some of that's out of our control, like inflation, and some of that in the contingency is out of control. That's why you have it. And I really like the graph that we were given in our packet that shows, a very high price or maybe a little bit lower price now, and then it starts to get tighter and tighter as we get closer to the project being done. But it has an upswing. It always kind of swings up and becomes more expensive over time, but the volatility goes way down. So that contingency goes down and down and down as we get to understand it better. It doesn't mean the cost goes down as we understand those other things that come in, but the cost doesn't necessarily go to that highest number. So I do want to make sure that, we're not planning to Mayor Pro Tem's point. If we're using the column that is the most expensive column, well, then it's going to be very hard to get our heads around doing very much. But that's the most expensive column. I think it's naive to work on the least expensive column. That won't do us much good either. So, I think having both of those in mind while we're going through these and then making decisions about, Bullhead Gulch might be my fifth choice, except if we can get it done for 5 million, we could actually do that one. So maybe that one jumps up in my priorities because it's not so expensive and because it isn't one that we're going to do that we might want as much beauty in that design. And so that one might be a higher priority for me because we could do 3 instead of 2 if we did that one, that kind of process. So Mayor, just to throw it out there so we don't have to keep coming back to me so often or we can get through some stuff. I really do think that the Main Street one is the most important. I think getting all the way to 20 million is probably not necessary, but I do like the dual direction. But if we can save 7 million going one direction, maybe that's worth it. Again, you do this whole underpass, this whole complicated thing, and then you ask bikers and pedestrians to cross an entrance into that area with no light or anything. It does seem, but for $7 million, are we trying to find a solution for that crossing? And I don't think we are. I don't think we're looking for a $6 million solution to get past that driveway. It's the underpass that's so expensive. So I think we can save a lot of money there, and that's my first priority. I personally actually think that the Bullhead Gulch is my second priority because of cost, and it's the one that gets us under the train tracks. And the third for me is the South Street and 42. And the fourth is Via Appia. And the fifth is probably Dillon Road. And the sixth for me is South Boulder and Highway 42. And the reason that one is the sixth is because of the existence of the current 142, the South Street and 42, the Main Street, and the Bullhead Gulch. If all four of those exist, that's why that one's unimportant to me. In and of itself, I think it's important, but as a broader picture, that one just becomes less important as we get more. And I do think it's a north-south regional goal. So Rick, you asked earlier why we would have it on the east. We're envisioning a great trail on the east side of 42, and this would help that trail keep going north-south. But for that reason, I think it's more regional. It's less local travel. If I live to the northeast, near the Burger King, I can get under 42, and I can now get under Main Street, or I could maybe get under the train tracks at Bullhead Gulch. I don't need the north-south on the east side of 42 under South Boulder Road as much. So I'm just throwing that out there. My order is Main Street, Bullhead Gulch, South and 42, Via Appia, Dillon, and then South Boulder and 42. And I would like us to fund it entirely with our current sources, with the 1.5 million we spoke about, the 1.25 million that the LRC spoke about. So the thing I would need to know is what do we think we can borrow with those two funding sources? And based on that, how many of these can we do? And I'm hoping we get to probably 3. That would be my hope, is that we're able to accomplish 3 of these underpasses. So I think with that, I don't need to talk for a long time.
Thank you very much, Council Member. Next in the queue, we have Council Member Brown.
Thank you very much. I think it's important what the residents want. And ultimately, I think it's important for us to remember that we're having this discussion because residents have identified these particular improvements as high priorities. We, as a council, have identified these particular improvements as high priority through our transportation master planning. And I think it will ultimately be up to the residents to decide whether or not we have put together a package that they can support, given the price tag that we may be asking them to fund. I will say this: I will have a hard time supporting any proposal that does not prioritize the Dillon Road connection. That is a particularly important connection for people, and so many of our citizens utilize the 36 corridor, the bike trail, to commute, utilize that area to get to the bus, come back from the bus, etc. So let's remember that Highway 42 and South Boulder Road are incredibly important, but transportation corridors. But the kind of core transportation hub of our town is in the 36 area here, and I think that our underpasses and the prioritization should reflect that. I will also say that I think that we should think about what that number is. I do not think that citizens will be opposed to an additional tax increase, but that will ultimately be up to voters to decide, right? And with all due respect to the Downtown Business Association, we ought to think about what the broader community wants while considering the Downtown Business Association's position on these particular issues. So for me, I would prefer to come up with a bond number that we can all agree on, that I think has a high likelihood of being able to fund most, if not all, of these particular underpasses, quite frankly, because I think we can afford it. And I think that from a financial standpoint, we would be silly not to take advantage of low interest rates, and then prioritize our underpasses, based on that that top line number. So those are my priorities. My priority is obviously Ward 3. My priority is making sure that we are taking advantage of this unique financial situation, and also, ultimately leaving it up to the voters to decide whether we can, whether they want to afford the improvements that they have identified as priorities. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilmember Brown. And as we're all adding our comments, if we can try to think of proposals that we think, there could be consensus around, considering all the different perspectives that we have on council, I think we'll be able to come up with something great together. Mayor Pro Tem Maloney?
Consensus, huh? Okay, let's go for that. I appreciate everybody's perspective, and I really appreciate this respectful conversation. And just what the mayor said, if we could coalesce around something we could all support, that would really be very, very good, because each one of these underpasses has merit. We're all going to have different opinion of which ones have more merit than others. And but before I get there, I do want to thank the Director Kowar and the staff and the consultants who worked on this. Some very interesting things have come out of this. Along with Councilor Dickinson, I'm taken back by the cost of some of these. And, I know that these may be what I think you call it the do it right design. That's a good moniker to use on these. But I also, I lean towards utility, and I lean towards, if we make a decision on, Main and South Boulder Road for the do it right design that excludes us from being able to do another underpass, that's a decision that's really easy for me. I would rather do more underpasses, and maybe I do have to loop around on my bike to go the other direction, but that's something that I'm willing to do, because I think the greater impact we make, the better. In previous conversations, we've talked about what's our comfort around utilizing internal funds. As the mayor has mentioned, we're talking about as much as 1.5 million in CIP. The LRC and their discussions yesterday are talking about in excess of $13 million over 10 years. And in addition to that, I would like us to consider what I would consider to be a modest property tax increase. And that, I'm talking about very modest, somewhere between $50 and $75 a home per year. If we do those things, combine those, I think we're looking at a number in the neighborhood of $50 million. Now, this doesn't do all of these underpasses, and so the prioritization becomes very, very important. As I look at these, the one at Main and South Boulder has a lot of reasons for us to consider that. A lot of safety issues, a lot of traffic issues. I do think it's interesting that it allows us to go, when you go south to north, it allows you actually to go both directions, east and west, and then go north from there. I know that Bullhead Gulch has been talked about a lot, but I think it solves some of those issues. It's not as direct going under the railroad tracks. But I look at South Boulder and Main as number one. I also agree with the Dillon Road and Power Line. One of the things when we as the city council approved the transportation master plan, at that point and every time when it's come up, I've always questioned really effectively and easily getting from the US 36 bikeway, the BRT, into town. And I think this is a pathway that does that. I personally have really crazy ways of doing it now, like going through the Lowe's parking lot and the Home Depot parking lot and things like that. But it's not something I suggest for a lot of traffic, and I don't think it's the best way to go. And then so first is South Boulder, Main, second is Dillon Road, and third is Via Appia. The two along 42, unless those get value engineered where they're more cost effective and don't have other impacts, I'm concerned about the one at South Street, closing South Street and impacting the recreation there. So to me, those are my top three. And if there's funds available, then I would consider the other ones. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Maloney. And next in the queue, we have Councilmember Lay.
Thanks. I too appreciate the respectful nature of this discussion. Those numbers, as we've all seen, are really sobering. They're going to be sobering for the community. I have a preliminary question and then a couple of comments. And the question arises because of something that Councilmember Dickinson said, which is, you know, what are the right numbers here? And I think I have a question for legal counsel, whoever is maybe able to answer this, and because if it was answered, I maybe didn't hear it. If we go back to the summary chart of expenses or costs of the various excuse me, underpasses, which of those numbers is the one that we'd have to reflect under Tabor in the ballot measure?
Thanks, Councilmember Lay. And just before we have staff answer that, I just want to note for the record, Councilmember Dickinson had to step away for a moment. No disrespect to anyone in the group, and he'll be back as soon as he can. And so I think a combination of folks may want to answer that. It may be good to turn to our bond counsel, but just to frame what I think I already heard from City Manager Balser, and maybe she'll want to chime in as well, is that what we would want to do is have a bond amount that we want to bond against. And then when we bid the projects, we'll do as many projects as we can within that amount. That's what I think I heard the city manager say. And so I'm not sure.
I appreciate it. Go ahead.
I'm just not sure if you want her to reiterate that or confirm or clarify that, or want to hear from the bond counsel about how we would list it in the.
Well, just to, I appreciate that, Mayor. I guess for my own part, it would be in dealing with the public. Some members of the public may ask a question like that. I don't know that we just don't answer that question or not, or we give them the table. But I do understand we can put the total number and we just get done what we do. But I think for the public, what I would want to know, or what I do want to know, but I think residents would want to know is, okay, you say you're going to get as many of these done as possible, but realistically, there may be some of them you can't get it on at all based on the numbers you already have. And I think we ought, there's, in my hierarchy, I think we should knock off the South Boulder Road and Highway 42 project entirely, at least for now, simply because it is, as we've talked about before, more of a regional project. There may be other ways to get that done, but that's the reason I take your point very carefully, Mayor, because I think you're right, but I also wonder if there's, and maybe it isn't a Tabor issue, maybe it's more of a political issue or an optics issue of just saying, all right, if we're going to put that number in there, then we probably ought not to do too much more than $50 million on our list. At least that would be kind of sort of the, if you will, as honest as we can be at this point. But let me ask the question to council: is you know, in describing that $50 million or whatever number we put in there, is that generally expected to include contingency, inflation, as we, or is it just not an issue at all?
I believe the number would need to include any contingency on the projects and inflation. The only thing we haven't discussed is bond issuance cost. And I think it's a question as whether we want to fund that with general fund reserve or if we would want to roll that into the bond cost. But that's sort of a fringe question compared to the magnitude of your other question.
So Mayor, can I just jump in here really quick, and then bond council can too? So I guess I would just say, so if you assume a certain price tag for these and you assume a CIP contribution, an LRC contribution, and then there's a gap between that and the total amount of what you want to construct, the bond council's direction at this point is to ask for that full amount. So because that's the best way to sell your bonds, recognizing that you will likely, when you go out to sell your bonds, you won't ask for that full amount. You'll subtract those other pieces that add to the total. So, but you do, it's certainly bond council advice that you ask for that full amount. So that's why the prioritization comes in, because we don't ultimately know the full cost. And when we go out to bid. And so, you know, that can come in a resolution and intent after the ballot language. But recognizing that the ballot language itself will be somewhat more flexible and will be that larger amount to cover the full cost. So if the bond council wants to jump in, I'm sure they have more information, but that's as clear as I can get about it. So
thank you, City Manager Balser. And that's what we talked about last time, which is consistent with what we did on the rec center. And then we didn't issue the full mill amount that we gave, that the voters gave permission for, just the amount that was actually needed was issued.
If with respect, I'd like to hear the bond council on that. It sounds like that from what City Manager Balser is suggesting, if we were serious about all, you know, putting all of them in there as potential projects, you'd want to put the $78 million price tag on there, or the $78 million number on there. Is that what I understand? First, is that what I understand City Manager Balser to be saying? And second, is that typically what your advice is to the bond council?
So City Manager Balser, is that what you meant?
No, I didn't actually mean, so I think you have to pick a dollar amount based on our estimates here, what we think we want to achieve. And so if that's 50 million, then you have to prioritize, and with the expectation that those that you can complete. And then if you have additional dollars in your so there's some flexibility there, but I think you have to pick your dollar amount based on what you think you'd like to achieve, whether that's 75, 60, 50, 40. So Kim, I'll let you add in here. Thank you.
No, you guys really are doing a great job and seem to really understand what's going on. But, you know, under Tabor, you have to ask for the amount that you're going to borrow. So the first line of the ballot question is, shall debt be increased by X dollars? So you do have to decide how much you want to borrow. If you want to do all the projects, then 78 million is the number, because you just don't know. You want to make sure you borrow enough so that you can complete what you're telling your voters that you're going to complete, which would include the contingencies and inflation and all those things. If you think 50 million is really all that your public is going to bear, then you will have to say, you know, 50 million is what we're going to borrow. It might be that you get a really big premium when you sell the bonds. I mean, big in that, I don't know what the premium is, but you might get some premium. So you might get a $50 million bond issue with maybe 5 million of premium that still falls within your ballot parameters. And that's pretty common. So maybe you can do a $55 million project, but you do have to decide, you know, how much money you want to borrow, and then pick the projects within that budget.
Yeah, and that's helpful. And what I understand, and just circling back to the mayor's point, that the ballot language will give us some flexibility with the public as to what we're representing that money will ultimately pay for. We don't have to say that we're going to absolutely complete these, because we know that there may be scenarios in which we can't complete all of them.
Right.
And I think I do get that piece too. And it may come down to that sort of how we do it. But in terms of my own my own prioritization of these, I think it's important to recognize, yes, the costs are huge. It's important also to recognize that, as the LRC, has pointed out, just by the amount of money that they're willing to put forward, these are projects that are transformative for a whole bunch of reasons, but they are also projects that are going to help to enhance the economy of the area. That is really important. I think that's a point that the mayor has made, and a number of other people have made. We're doing these not just for that reason. We're doing them partly because the city has and its residents want connectivity. That's really important. And that's important for all of the wards, not just one. It's a whole city issue, even if most of these projects end up in one ward, which most of them do. But I think that's really important. I think we're doing it for safety. We're doing it for efficiency. We're doing it for sustainability, in the sense of encouraging people to walk, to run, to cycle. We're connecting, we're doing it from an intergovernmental standpoint of working with our neighbors to provide trail connections. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things wrapped up into this. And we've also said for years, and everybody on council who's been on council for multiple cycles, that, it's up to the voters in the end. It's a really good public policy decision to send these to the voters to make the decision, because it's ultimately, we can't do this under our current budget. We won't be able to do this on our current budget. And there are really good reasons for trying to get the thing done soon and together, so we can get as good a rate for the construction as possible. So anyway, we're all focused on cost, and that's critical to be focused on. But we're getting huge benefits out of this, we hope, and huge economic benefits, which are going to help to sustain us going forward. So anyway, I think from my standpoint, I think far and away the main South Boulder Road underpass is important. I think Via Appia and South Boulder Road is also important, and Dillon, I think Bullhead Gulch and South Street. After that, I'm concerned about South Street a little bit. I might put them, might put that one a little bit higher if I had felt a little bit better about the numbers. I think we should just take South Boulder Road east of 42 just off there. I just don't think that one's ready for prime time, and I think it's much more of a regional project. So that would be my lineup. I appreciate Councilmember Dickinson's comment about maximizing, north, south, east, west. There's good comments in there, but I think we need to bite the bullet on at least one of these and just simply not include it, and at least that's a start. Thanks.
Thanks, Councilmember Lay. I'll add my comments in at this point. I just really appreciate all the work that the staff has put into this. The finance staff, our bond council, public works staff, the planning staff, through the TMP, the city manager's office. And I also want to thank the members of the public. I have gotten comments on these underpasses since 2013, literally, and they are included in our plans and programs from the community, from small area plans to regional trail plans. Like, these are clearly a priority for the community, and I really appreciate Mr. Crone's comments that he sent us in writing, and also voiced. I mean, there are concerns of raising funds, and it is a really good opportunity to take into account the low interest rates. And Mr. Johnson's comments this evening, I think, really reflected the comments I've heard from members of the community about wanting to have really wonderful places that connect one another, that make people feel like, I'm in Louisville, this is my town, I can get to my friend's house, I can get to the bike shop, I can get to the restaurant, I can get to school, I can get to work, and I don't have to get in my car because it's safe and comfortable, and I can take these alternate modes and reduce my carbon impact and safely get around the community. So I'm super excited about the underpasses. I'll just lead with that. I think that this is a really exciting opportunity, and the low interest rate that we have in front of us today is an opportunity to try to get more of these taken care of in the short term, and hopefully try to get ahead of cost escalation that we all sort of are foreseeing in the future. So I just want to reiterate what I heard the city manager say, that, you know, we all are committed to the $1.5 million from CIP, and the contributions from the LRC are excellent. And so when we're doing our calculations ourselves, we're looking at what mill levy would actually have to be raised to increase that difference, and looking at exactly what Mayor Pro Tem Maloney talked about with the $50 to $75 a year if we go with the 50 million. But what I think I heard the city manager say, and what I heard the bond council say last time, is that when we ask the question, we'll want to ask for authority for the whole mill rate that you would need to cover the bond costs. And I see Mayor Pro Tem Maloney nodding his head yes in agreement. So that's what people are talking about, the whole amount, not because we would ever issue mills of that amount, but because we would want to ensure that we can cover it if there's some kind of catastrophe or some other, it makes the bond sale more effective, that we can actually cover the cost of the projects, and so that we're more credible, that's my understanding of it. So I'm totally supportive of that, and just wanted to reiterate it. I absolutely hate the idea of ranking these, because I hate the idea of pitting one area of town against each other, but I understand the practicality of it. I think there are really important needs in every part of town. I think there are open space needs, there are safe route to school needs, there are transportation needs. And so that's why when one board says, well, why didn't I get to make the rank? It's like, well, it's not just an open space list. Open space is a major factor because that's a huge opportunity for our community, but it's just one factor. It's also not just an LRC list, right? Like, it's not just what are the urban renewal opportunities. That's a major factor, but it's not only an LRC list. It's not only a transportation, you know, how's the fastest way to get around town. So there's all these different elements that we're trying to balance and make sure we can get the best of forward. And so just with all of those things, I agree with Mayor Pro Tem Maloney's approach in coming up with a budget, trying to get as many in under that budget as we can. And, you know, it's looking like with the numbers that we see in our packet with the contingencies, like maybe we'll be able to get 3 done with that approach if we use around $50 million. But if we get really favorable pricing, we might be able to get a 4th or 5th done. So it really, we don't know. But I mean, I think what we could say with pretty good confidence is it's looking like 3, and we will try to get as many done as we can. And so with that, I will add my rank order at much peril, because I don't like to put them in order at all. But the first priority, in my opinion, is the Dillon Road. It connects to the US 36 bus station for the whole community. The power line trail runs to the farthest point north in town, and you'll have a concrete trail that connects continuously from there to the bus with no huge roads to cross. You will have to hit the crosser at Via Appia. And actually, when I was talking about these underpasses with residents, they actually wanted me to add in more underpasses. The people I talked to, they wanted Via Appia and the power line and the Cheria power line. So I didn't have anybody telling me to take any of these off. I had people telling me to add in more, just for the record. So that's the number 1 on my list, and then Main Street, and then Bullhead Gulch, and then Via Appia, and then South Boulder Road and 42, and then the South Street, just because of the complications with the design that we've seen today. And I just really want to end again with all of the thanks to everyone. Councilmember Fahey.
Thank you, Mayor. And I add my thanks to staff and the finance people, everybody that's had their work done for quite some time on this particular project. I agree that I'd like to somehow get all of them done. And I will prioritize, kind of, not entirely. And I will say that my number 6 would be the South Boulder Road and 42. And the reason that I would put that last is because I think that we could possibly get other funding from other sources to help with the cost of putting that one in. If we're working with when they're redoing Highway 42 or get regional, maybe the county or somebody involved in helping with that cost. So that's why I put that one number 6. My number 1 is Main Street. I think it's very important to connect the north and south parts of town. For the children to get to school, for people to get from all of the areas north of South Boulder Road to downtown and vice versa. People who live in the Old Town section would like sometimes to go up north and see what's up there. I would encourage also that that be the only one, or the most important one in my mind, to make at that high design level, because it's so central to the town. It connects everything. That would be the one where I would be willing to put in a lot of extra money in order to get it looking like a wonderful thing to experience. Then the other 4, I think the Dillon Road and Via Appier are about the same, like 2 and 3, but I don't know which one is which. And then South Street and Bullhead Gulch would be 4 and 5. And again, either way.
All right. Councilmember Lipton, you are the only person who has not ranked them in my spreadsheet. Would you care to take on that exercise, or would you like to hear where the group is trending? I hate to tell you that without you ranking them.
I've been taking copious notes, so I think I understand where the group is trending. But that's not necessarily where I'm trending. I guess my highest priority is certainly going to be Main Street and South Boulder Road. But I definitely am not supportive right now of the grand design that was presented. I think spending $6 or $7 million on this one little section that adds to that design cost doesn't resonate with me. My second highest priority is Via Appia and South Boulder Road, and then my third is Bullhead Gulch. I think the South Street is probably number 4, but with considerable revisions and downsizing of the design and working out a lot of those other issues. I thought this was going to be a very utilitarian type of connection, and I would support it more if it remained that way. So those are my top 3 and 4 lists.
Thank you. And so where the group is trending, and I recognize this is no one's perfect list. And so, we're a body of 7 trying to come up with the best thing that we can, weighing all these different complicated factors. For Caleb's shirt, it's complicated. So where we're trending is Main Street is the highest priority. So the order would be Main Street, Dillon, Via Appia, Bullhead Gulch, South Street, and then South Boulder Road and 42. And all I did was take the average of everyone's ranks. And if they left it blank, it got dropped out of the average. It wasn't a 0, it just didn't get averaged. So some of you, some people listed all of them. Some people only did the top 1 or the top few. So is that a rank order people feel comfortable going forward with? It seems like the reasoning was pretty strong, and it's a good blend of all of our different opinions. Councilmember Dickinson.
Yeah, Mayor, I agree. Like, I think, Dillon Road is way higher than I would put it, but it's it's what the group is talking about. So it's a good example of me disagreeing with something, but being okay with that in there. I think it's a decent list. And like you said, I don't think any of us are going to be happy. Individually, I don't know that this is anyone's exact list. Maybe it is. Raise your hand if you got it. Is this anyone's exact order? But you know, I think it's a reasonable order. And then I think, you know, to getting deeper into the discussion of what the actual costs end up being, that's when, you know, it's like, if Bullhead Gulch, if we could only do 2, but we could do a third if we did Bullhead Gulch, but we can't do a third if we do Via Appia, that's where I want us to be creative about saying, well, listen, I'd rather do Via Appia or Bullhead Gulch, but I'd rather do one than neither, right? And so I could see the order changing if it was the difference between one getting done or not. And I think that's why one of the reasons I had Bullhead Gulch up higher is because I felt like it was one we could do. But I like the order. I could support that order of 6 that you gave us.
Great. And then the other thing that I've heard because we'll probably go back through everybody. So I'll come back to Councilmember Dickinson if he wants to add it. I've heard the number 50 million used several times. And I know when I ran scenarios, I ran the max number, I ran a 50 million scenario, and then I optimized around the $50 a house number to come up with a bond rate for that as well. So I think the 50 million number creates a situation with the commitments that we've made where we would be able to get to the target range Mayor Pro Tem Maloney is talking about. So that seems like an area to target is about $50 million worth of projects. And I wonder what people's reaction is to that on this second go around. So the second go around of comments is really on the rank order that we've come up with together, and if the $50 million bond is the right place to land. Mayor Pro Tem Maloney?
Of course, I was the one who brought it up.
You could have saved us a lot of time.
I did earlier, but no, I'm fine. I'm fine with the list, first off. And I'm fine with 50 million makes sense to me if we're going to do it this way and have a modest property tax increase relying upon internal resources. But I guess I want to flavor this a little bit. I mean, we talk about if there's money left over, could we do another underpass? Well, that might be possible, but the number might be less than that. So when we talk about the language around this, at least for the ballot issue and what we're constrained to doing, some of these we could, with the exception of Bullhead Gulch, we could spend money on at-grade crossings and other places, these intersections and other places in town. So as we talk about available money, I'd like to see it invested in the same theme.
So the direction of the bond council would be that the money could be expended on, you know, these types of underpasses and transportation projects. Is that the kind of language you're asking to see?
Yeah, something along those lines. But I guess I'm looking for, you know, if we can't do all these underpasses, and I'm excluding Bullhead Gulch because it doesn't cross the street, but the other ones, and we have other places where we could do at-grade crossings that could actually help with transportation in town.
So Kim, could you tell us a little bit? I mean, that probably won't all be in the ballot language, but would you suggest we do sort of like a letter of intent from the council of what we're hoping to accomplish to explain all of this, or what would you suggest we do?
I would actually suggest that the ballot question be pretty general, just to allow you flexibility to make just those kinds of decisions later on. Because if you list in your ballot question, we're going to do these 5 things, and then you don't do those 5 things, then it's problematic historically under state law and case law. There is some flexibility, but in listening to the conversation today and the description of the projects, I was just kind of looking at the ballot question, and this would certainly be up to you all when you're approving it. But I was thinking something maybe along the lines of transportation improvements, including but not limited to underpasses, bike paths, pedestrian walkways, trails, and related improvements. So you're not really limited to one site, but you're allowing enough flexibility to do a number of different things with respect to various improvements. And I would also suggest, or what I see done not frequently, but occasionally, is that you would adopt maybe a resolution of intent, just kind of citing what you have done, what the staff has done, what determinations you've made, the priorities that, your current intent is to do these improvements in these priorities, depending upon how much your bond proceeds are and the costs of each of the projects. And then you can just kind of itemize it from there. It wouldn't limit you, but it's just your current intent so that the voters know what your thoughts are right now.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Maloney, is that the approach that is consistent with what you were describing?
Absolutely. I think that that's the proper way to do it. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it. I just wanted to sort of second or voice my support, I guess, for the approach that the Mayor Pro Tem has outlined, as well as you have outlined, Mayor. The rank order sounds right, given the discussion that we have had. And I think that the modest property tax increase, along with funding from the LRC, along with bonding against existing revenue, seems like the right approach. And so a $50 million package with all of those sources of revenue seems like the right way to go. So I'm on board with this approach.
Thank you. Councilmember Lipton.
Thank you. So the question I'm kind of tossing around in my mind is the LRC, I think was very generous, but I think they also contemplated they would get more benefits than what we're providing in this list. So I was wondering how we should manage that issue. And Chris, maybe, you were on the call and you heard the conversation. What's your thinking on that?
That was the point I was going to raise. There's no agreement right now between council and the LRC, and I think there would be concern. I think there's no question there'd be some concern, because on this list, only one, an important one, the number one, is on the list. But at the same time, the other two that we're contemplating are at the bottom. And I think realistically, if what we're talking about is underpasses, I don't know. To me, I've expressed my concern about whether it's really appropriate for us to include those in the list, but or the last one at least. But what I would say is that Mayor Pro Tem's suggestion is a very good one, because I think I think we have to be real clear to the LRC, or we will, in the agreement that we have, that we are going to do at-grade improvements at the very least on one of those, if not both of them, and that might vault, one of them a little bit up the list, just because it's easier to accomplish. But I do think that there might be some pushback on it, and so to that extent, because the presumption was at least there would be a couple of them in the mix, and that's not something that anybody represented, but I certainly was thinking along those lines, and I'm sure others, that was going through others' minds as well. So I do have concerns about it, Councilmember Lipton, and but I do think also that it may help with that to try to prioritize non underpass solutions for one or both of those other underpass areas. Does that help?
Councilmember Dickinson?
Thanks. Yeah, I think some of the same thoughts around the LRC throwing in as much money as they're throwing in, and the chances of the fifth one being built being so slim, that is hard for me. And I think the reason that South and 42 has been in my top 2 or 3 the whole time is that it crosses a highway, like literally Highway 42. From a safety perspective, it's maybe the most dangerous current location, and it also connects to one we built under the South Street under the railroad. So I really thought it was a good connection from Lafayette to us, if you think of it that way. Of course, I bike out to Lafayette and come back, but we would like Lafayette to bike into our downtown, and it's an awesome connection. And it is, for me, when I bike around town, it's the hardest connection, and I usually just cross right at Pine and 42 through that light and take Empire. And so there are ways, we all know that, there are ways to get across every one of these streets safely. That we added a light on 42, which is helpful. I do think that it would be unfortunate for this Highway 42 one not to get built. And I think I was the one who said I really appreciated the bold concepts, but I think this is one where if you get back to something really utilitarian, really simple that gets us under, and that's just safe and gets us under this road, and it was way less expensive, then maybe it's one that again, we can get up in, and maybe we can do 5 because we make them less expensive, but really thinking as a group of 7, how do we get this one built? If it's going to be the 5th priority, how do we get to 5? Because I think not getting this one is something we're going to regret when we extend 42, and it's a highway, and to not have an underpass under this highway, I think we're going to regret. So I'm not upset about the list. I like that we all put our opinions in, but just throwing another little thorn in the side there.
I just would want to understand a little more around the people's feelings on the LRC comments. I mean, on one hand, I do understand what people are saying, that, the LRC's contributed significantly, and that's true. But I also heard when we were meeting with them that, they might want to contribute to pay for the Main Street underpass, and their contribution doesn't pay for the Main Street underpass. So, it's like, it is absolutely a significant contribution, and these underpasses are very expensive, and the ones in the urban renewal area are the most expensive. And that's why we have an urban renewal area, because infrastructure is more expensive and more complicated in an urban renewal area. It's infill, it's complicated, it's hard. That's why you do urban renewal, because the developers can't pay for the infrastructure that you need to connect it. So, I mean, I do totally understand it's expensive. It would have been nice to get all of them. I never even wanted to rank them because of this exact right? So I do get it, but on the other hand, I feel like we could have some good conversation around this, and we are all prioritizing the LRC underpass as the highest priority underpass, and it's the most expensive, and it's gonna be complicated, and so that one's gonna get done. Mm-hmm. And so to me, I mean, it's hard to say that we should move around the order because of the contribution, because the contribution doesn't pay for 50% of 2. So it's like, I'm also struggling with it. So I understand the point about it's a lot of money, and so we want to make sure that we're reflecting their contribution adequately, but I have a hard time saying that we're not also, because we all value all of these locations, and I don't know. I'm struggling with some of the comments around it. That's all I'm trying.
If you don't mind me responding to that, Mayor, I really appreciate those comments, and I think you're dead on all of it. And I think, the LRC is listening in, and certain members are, and I don't think there's any conversation here where we're like, oh, good, let's get their money and then do something different with it. There's no intention there. It's really genuinely trying to do what's best for the whole community. And I agree with a lot of things you said, that the costs are the costs, and we certainly are prioritizing an underpass in that area. So I guess I'll end it there. I appreciate your comments.
Councilmember Lipton. Councilmember Lipton.
Yes, just trying to find my unmute button. So I'm still struggling with the Dillon Road underpass being as high, prioritized as high as it is. And I noted in the staff report that staff had Dillon Road prioritized as, I believe, number 5. And I was also interested, and I know we had some conversation about Dillon Road having some on-grade improvements. And if we're going to carve out some money, you intend to carve out money for that, whether some good on-grade improvements can really take care of our needs on Dillon Road. You know, I think for the most part, this is not going to be used for commuting. I think it's a recreational amenity, and we have other places that actually will have more demand in terms of use. And I hate to just throw them away for Dillon Road. But anyway, I'm asking Kurt, I guess, to talk about his prioritization on Dillon Road and to see whether or not there are some on-grade improvements that could be substituted for an underpass.
Fair question, Director Cowart. And just, I think we did start off this whole thing saying that every single one of these could be accomplished in a different way.
Yes, that is true. So surface crossing at Dillon Road, I think the last time we actually bid that, it was $400,000 to $500,000. So let's say it's now $750,000, and maybe you pizzazz it up and you get to $1 million. So call it $1 million surface crossing at Dillon Road if you wanted that. What was the second part of your question? Because
so Kurt, I mean, is it practical to do a surface crossing at Dillon Road?
I think it is. Yeah, I mean, it can be
intended effects, and would it be generally safe and conducive to traffic?
I think any of these could be safe as a surface crossing. So I think it's not necessarily is it safe. I think it's, what does your community want? What are the trends in transportation and sustainability and multimodal? They're all safe as a surface crossing. Several of these ones you guys have just brought up as getting a surface crossing instead actually have a surface crossing. We just put in a signal at Short. That is a safe surface crossing. It's a block away from South. South Boulder Road has a surface crossing in all four directions. It comes down to comfort and quality of life, to answer your question. As far as prioritization, our staff prioritization was, I guess, based off what we think we've heard from everybody, but your conversation tonight has certainly opened my mind way more now that I've heard where you all consider priorities. But I think we felt what seemed like we needed to get it done and owed it to the community and was very doable, AKA a Bullhead Gulch. And then what areas just could be transformative. And then we showed you 3, I think, more signature underpasses at Main via Appia and South Street where we felt we could activate the community more. But if you wanted those to be utilitarian, then we can certainly back that off. So that's my opinion on that.
No, those are good thoughts. And I still think, and we haven't really discussed it, we really haven't hit the sweet spot in terms of functionality and design on at least 2 or 3 of these. And I think if we really had a serious conversation about that, you can probably fit in all 3, possibly 4 underpasses, and perhaps not even have to do a property tax increase. You know, in terms of design, you know, I was trying to think of a underpass that would meet my, you know, design interests and criteria. And, you know, the one I use quite often, and I think it works fine, is the one over by Davidson Mesa. It doesn't have to be terribly fancy, but it's very functional. And, you know, it certainly isn't, certainly not ugly. It's actually very pleasing. And then that's kind of what I would use as a standard in terms of what I'd like to see with the rest of them. You can dress them up a little bit here and there, but, you know, those aren't expensive improvements. But, you know, in terms of functionality and cosmetic design, I think that would be kind of what I would be aiming for.
I would agree with what you said, and where we could lay it back and we had land to work with, I think that's kind of where we took that approach, and you saw that in the cheaper costs. But as we've stated in this discussion, several people, these urban areas are complex and we end up with walls. And so now you have to spend money so it doesn't feel like this dark canyon. It has to feel more like you know, a place, a lobby to your transportation system, like a lobby to a building. So it just has to be something more than just concrete. And that's where we can probably back some things off and strike a balance, but it's still going to have a cost. Listening to all of you, if you just went with the 50% contingency, and let's simplify it and just say, let's all agree the 50% will include our inflation, then I think the bundle of 4, Maine, Bullhead, Dillon, and Via Appia, would be 20 at Maine, 6 at Bullhead, 10 at Dillon, 15 at Via Appia. That's with the 50% contingency and not messing with anything, you're at 51. So as we design and contingencies come down and we back off some designs and maybe we try and get South Street to 5 to 6 million, you may be in the hunt for 5 of them when the numbers start to, I think, better match some reality. I think we're appropriately conservative, but I don't think we're in reality right now.
Councilmember Lipton, did you want to add anything?
No, I mean, other than to conclude, I think the conversation with Kurt for me is I would think for Highway 42, for Dillon Road, we could appropriately do a on-grade crossing and do it well. And I'm not sure we need an underpass there.
Thank you. And next we have Mayor Pro Tem Maloney.
Thank you, Mayor. One of the things to consider in all this is, we're looking at numbers that will be the principal amount of what we'll be borrowing. When we talk about the LRC contribution, which is a significant investment in this, we talk about, well, they're only really, contributing, but they only care about the one that is currently listed that's in, in the urban renewal area. The 13.75 million actually doesn't, it covers a portion of the cost of one of the underpasses when we talk about making payments over 30 years. So we got to remember that the financing cost is significant. So let's just keep that frame. But $13.75 million is a significant contribution and helps a great deal. But it is approximately half of the cost when we add all the financing costs up on that. Regarding the underpasses, my comments about the one at South Street, I was just taken back by the design and cost and, the impact of the whole area. I believe that one's important too. I agree with Councilor Dickinson. And, for me, that is one that affects transportation. And that's why, for me, that was, I believe, my 4th one, something like that. But anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Maloney. Councilmember Fahey.
Thank you. So I'm going to reiterate that I agree with the priorities that we set. And I do still think that the Main Street underpass should be something above just a concrete tunnel. But the other ones don't necessarily have to be. I mean, I'm as Councilman Lipton said, I'm very happy with the underpass under McCaslin up at Harper Lake. It's functional, it's bright, it's wide, it's perfect. And I don't think any of the other ones that are just trail connections need to be anything more significant than that. Just provide the function. I only want a little bit more than function at Main Street.
Thanks, Councilmember Fahey. Councilmember Lay, take us home.
Thanks. There doesn't seem to be any energy around the idea or support for the idea of, I guess, reflecting in our final list what we're realistically able to build for a $50 million number, which is what I think we're kind of coalescing around. I'm personally troubled by that, as I've said before, but I recognize that I may be just an outlier on that. I think if we aren't willing to be clear about what we realistically think we can do in terms of underpasses, then I think it really is incumbent on us to take the approach that Mayor Pro Tem suggested about including other sorts of improvements within the language of what we're wanting to do. That is potential at-grade improvements. And I think the other thing is I still do have some concerns about how the LRC is going to react to this. I really do. I don't think that, you know, their support is going to be, you know, I mean, it is committed in some respects, but there's no agreement yet. And I think if they see that those two that are at the bottom are not realistically going to be addressed at all, then I don't know whether it's going to get, whether we're going to get that agreement or not, or whether it might be scaled back. I don't know. I mean, clearly everybody recognizes the importance of the Main Street South Boulder Road connection. We do, the LRC does. I wish that we could represent somehow, and we don't have to have all this in the bond language. I understand they're the ballot measure in any event, but that we can assure somehow our support for at-grade improvements at South Street, at least, or in that general area. I think the other thing, apart from that, is I agree with others who've talked about how fancy these various underpasses have to be. I don't think we need to deal with that tonight, but that's a separate question, but I think we're going to have to deal with that. We know already there's going to be pressure to deal with that, because as we get closer to designs being done, they're going to have significant differences. So I really would encourage us, if not to change the order, which I think people are solid behind. I don't disagree that that's where the group is headed, that we include some language, not just about underpasses, but other kinds of improvements at grade or in whatever document we need to reflect that in, and that we make as clear a preference for providing those kinds of at-grade improvements to one or the other of the two underpass that we've other underpasses that we've been identified in the URA, and I would suggest it should be South Street. Thanks.
Thank you. And I'll just let Councilmember Dickinson know he has to take off from the meeting. Councilmember Dickinson.
Yeah, thank you guys. Sorry, I was unaware of the length, and I have an 8:30 commitment to get back to my children. So I apologize. I'll stay on for another 5 minutes.
Thank you, Councilmember Dickinson, and thank you, Councilmember Lay. So what I heard people say if you could try to carry forward our message to the Urban Renewal Authority, there's obviously a priority for Main Street. There's no wavering in that across the board, and that the other underpass, our hope is to be able to get that far down the list. But the reality is we might not be able to afford it. And Mayor Pro Tem Maloney made a good point around, if you look at the principal and interest payments on the total cost of what it would cost us to borrow for the $20 million for Main Street, it's quite a substantial figure if you include the interest, and the payments from the Revitalization Commission are of course not in year one, they're over the course of 10 years and time value money. So it's not in any way to slight them or to discount the contribution, but there's a significant cost associated with that underpass too. So we're hopeful that they'll maintain their support of the overall project, and the more support they're able to provide, the farther down the list we'll be able to get. So there's good reason to stay engaged and to consider continuing down this path with us. And then Councilmember Lay, excellent points on the letter of intent that we'll want to draft. If it makes sense to you, Mayor Pro Tem Maloney and I can work with the staff over the next couple of months to get that, or I guess month, to get that worked out. So we can draft something up, and then that would come to council, obviously, to see if it meets your needs and everyone's needs around that area, because I think those are really important points that we want to be as communicative as we can to the community around what our intention is on this. And then we have time to work out, the specifics with our boards and commissions and everything like that around exactly what level of underpass we want. And there were some disputes within this group on, what level of design it needs to be for each one. And I just want to remind that, we all committed to including public art in the underpasses from the onset. So it's not more costly after the fact and things like that. So I'm sure we'll continue to get those types of comments. So we definitely want to make them right for Louisville. So, striking that right balance is going to be an important effort that we undertake over the next year and a half, and I'm confident we'll be able to do it. So I believe we are giving staff direction on a $50 million bond issuance question to come back to us. And the priority order that we kind of talked about is Main, Dillon, via Appia, Bullhead, South Boulder Road, and 42. And I just would want to ask, and that Mayor Pro Tem Maloney and I will work with staff on our letter of intent, or I'm not sure what it's actually called. So whatever that document would be called, that's sort of a partner resolution, maybe, that the council passes, that we'll work on that. Thanks, Councilmember Dickinson. And I want to give staff a chance to let us know if we need to elaborate on any other points here this evening, and then we can go back around with other questions and comments. So City Manager Balser, are there other points we need to ensure we nail down this evening?
No, and just want to confirm, and Kim, but that the ballot language is as we've suggested, or something to that effect, based on the additional language, but the 50 million that we talked about in the packet. So Kim, do you need any more direction related to that based on this conversation?
I don't think so. I'll work with you all to get the maximum annual and total repayment numbers.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Great. And then Mayor, I would just add, the cooperation agreement, the LRC is having a special meeting on June 30th, so that will come back to you on the 13th. So we'll have to structure that as well. So I appreciate this conversation, but you will get to see that, as that will have to be approved by City Council, then go back to LRC for approval. And then in terms of the resolution or intent, we'll work on that. I'm just not sure what the timing is for that, consistent with the ballot language. So we'll work with you, but we'll also work with bond counsel to figure out when the appropriate time to bring that is, whether that's first reading, second reading, or after second reading. We'll work on that and figure out timing.
Thank you very much, City Manager Balser. Director Coher wanted to add in on that, and then we'll go to Councilmember Lay.
Just to build upon what the city manager said, if you would like to continue our momentum, then the staff will be bringing back an additional contract amendment for design on July 13th for the council to consider.
Thank you, Director Coher. You guys have been rocking it, so I'm sure we'll want to see that to keep up the good work. Councilmember Lay.
Thanks. Just a couple of clarifying questions, excuse me. We're not are we or are we not voting today on the exact language that we would approve for the ballot measure.
I do not believe we're voting on that today. City Manager Balser, I believe that's what we're voting on in July. Will you confirm that for us?
That's correct. July 13th is the first reading of proposed ballot language. So that's when we will have the formal discussion. Well, it'll be first reading and then second reading will be on July 27th. So that's when you'll take a vote. We're getting direction on how we want that framed at this point.
Yeah, as the only question that I have, and it may be a question for council or it may be a question for bond counsel. I'll just address it to council. I'm looking at page 9 and 10 of the packet, just the language that we've discussed before. It refers to approving the increase in debt, blah, blah, blah. Such debt and taxes to be used for the purpose of financing the acquisition and construction of transportation improvements, including but not limited to, and then whatever detail we choose. And I guess it would be useful, at least for me, especially when I go to the meeting with the rest of my colleagues on the LRC, to know whether at the very least we're talking about including language that not only refers to construction of underpasses, but potentially other kinds of improvements like at grade. It seems like that language probably will end up doing that, but there's also uncertainty right now about what comes after that, which is, bracketed to say how detailed the city would like to be in the description is something we can work out. So it would be nice to have a sense from council about where they are around that issue. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Sorry, Mayor. So I would just add, so I think, recognizing that was previous to this discussion. So I think Kim had given some thoughts on how that language might change. So I think based on this conversation, we would go back. Oops, sorry, I lost you there for a minute. See what the best language is consistent with this conversation, also recognizing that the language in the ballot language is going to be more flexible than ultimately what you may include in an intent or resolution to that effect.
And I do understand that. I'm not trying to be a pain in the rear. I'm trying to be able to fend off questions about bait and switch. And I honestly, to be blunt about that, I just want to know if our discussion is to have that, to follow the suggestion that was made by Pro Tem Maloney or not. And if it's not, then we can manage it, but I just need to know, I just need to have that direction.
I think that everyone agreed with Mayor Pro Tem Maloney's direction on this. The intent is to build the underpasses. We may not be able to do them all, so we can use excess funds, to do at-grade improvements as well. I think that was
the second question. Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that. The second clarifying question had to do with the timing of the letter of intent or whatever we're planning to come up with to provide a little bit more detail about what we're intending here. Is that when are we likely to have a draft of that? Will that be before or after the date of the meeting, the next meeting of the LRC?
So I think what City Manager Balser said was that they were going to work with bond counsel to determine the timing on that, to understand what the time would be. So the question, we don't know, but probably after, because you said the LRC meeting is the 30th and it's the 17th. So
exactly.
Yeah, that sounds probably right. I just looking for a little bit of direction. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for the really robust discussion this evening, and everyone thanks the staff, and I just don't think we can thank you all enough, from the bond counsel, city manager's office, to the public works staff, to the planning staff, to the economic vitality staff, finance staff, I may have listed you twice, but that's because you did a bunch of work. It's just incredible how much effort and cooperation and collaboration has been poured into this, and we could get a really exciting outcome from it. So thanks for everything and all the blood, sweat, and tears everybody's poured into it. Anything else for the good of the cause this evening? All right, seeing nothing, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Have a good vacation.